I used to dabble in the art and the crafts of, what would you call it?
Oh, you weren't doing art. You were fucking around.
Austin and I used to do like ghost hunting shit. We used to go places and we used to actively seek out certain paranormal events and activities and encounters.
You're just
whatever.
too irritating for me to do haunted stuff with now.
But why?
Because you're like, I don't believe, but then you're gonna talk about like I was possessed.
The thing is that I don't instigate, and I'm not an asshole when it comes to that kind of stuff. It's just I had one bad experience early on where I was being kind of pushy with some spirits, and there was something that happened.
I can't do this if you're gonna lie.
Okay, see, that's the thing. I'm not lying. And that's why we're both here,
Pushy
to tell
is
both
the
sides of the
lightest
story.
way to ever say anything. He antagonizes everything that you shouldn't ever antagonize, and it wasn't a one-time thing. It's an every-time thing. If we're ever in a group, he's the one that's like, fucking do something, tell yourself. You don't have to be disrespectful.
I don't think I'm disrespectful, but I will tell you about the time that I was.
So I think I was 16, so I think you were 15.
Really?
I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're like way older than me. So
That's why I'm taller than you.
Oh yeah, because you're like 1 year older. That means you're one
inch taller.
Yeah, exactly. So I was probably around 15 or so, and I had a girlfriend at the time, and I was over at her house, and her cousin was there, and her cousin's friend
two girls
was there.
Flex.
There was
okay.
and her cousin was a guy. We were hanging out, right? And we were bored, and I think my girlfriend at the time, we'll just call her C. I don't want to say her name. So we were over at her place, and she had suggested that we play with a Ouija board. At the time, I had never used one before, so I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. I don't believe in this. I don't believe in this shit. Everyone else in the room has like experience with this except for me. They had gotten the whole thing started, and they had set up the candles. They were kind of explaining the whole process and the whole point of the light candles and the whole point of the dark candles. And the whole, like, let's try and contact, late relatives. Of course, when there's a fucking Ouija board and everyone's moving their hand around, you don't really believe that it's being actually moved or anything like that.
It depends on who you're with.
I think it was pretty known with everyone that was there that I was a little skeptical. For the most part, they were like, hey, if you're not interested in this, you should let us know, because it's not good to be involved with this if you're, like, a skeptic or if you don't believe in what's going on. I think you've told me the same thing before. C at the time was like, why don't you put out your hand, and what I'll do is I'll ask this spirit to embrace you and try and make their presence known so that you know that there's someone actually here or something actually here with us. It was a very, very like cold and like very cool and chilling and very like numbing sensation around my hand and kind of like going up my arm. But at the time, I didn't really think anything of it.
Right.
Because realistically, it's like if you have your hand out like this for like an extended period of time, then your hand is probably going to go to sleep. As time went on, I got impatient. I was like, okay, well, I really want to like have some sort of encounter. If we're going to do this, then let's fucking do this. And they had said that there's designated candles for each thing and whatever. And so essentially they blew out all of the light candles, and all that we had left were the black and dark red candles that were designated for more, I'm not going to say evil, but I'm not going to say like...
You can say it.
For the lesser kinded spirits, whatever. And when we did that, it was me and her cousin, which is the guy. I forget his fucking name. Once we blew out those fucking candles, we were talking to the spirits that were in there. And there was a few that kind of deemed themselves to be, I guess, less than friendly beings. What are some of the things that would happen when you know that's like, oh, this is bad? Like, you're not supposed to let this happen?
When it counts 1 to 10, or if it tries to go all 4 corners of the thing, or do the whole alphabet.
Yeah.
Like, just like going straight through it.
So a lot of that shit would happen. There was this particular entity that made himself known, and his name was... Jason. And some of you may know about Jason, some of you may not, but I'm going to tell you
John's boyfriend
about this being that was real friendly with me for quite some time. And
that made it sound like a boyfriend.
Yeah. He had spelled out his name for us. We're like, okay, tell us a little bit about yourself. And he was being really sketchy and being really evasive with a lot of the questions that we were asking. The energy in the room kind of just dropped. And then we were getting like this very, very tense and like overwhelming feeling. When it got like super hot in the room, there was just like this wave of just tenseness. This guy was saying things like beware and, you know, like look out and shit like that, and it kept going to the fucking number board, and it kept saying goodbye and doing all of this shit. Realistically, I was certain that everyone was just moving it on the board, right. And that none of it was actually happening or going down. I was not. Jason supposedly was getting angry with me, and we felt that, and or at least they could tell that, and so they were asking very specific questions like, can you tell us what you're upset about, like what's wrong, you know? I had tried encouraging the spirit to speak with us. I tried saying, you know, being like, hey, like if there's anyone actually here, you know, reach out, let us know, like, of your presence.
Is this
here.
actually how you think you sound?
I swear to God, that was what was basically going down. And I remember there was this one particular moment where we were sitting doing the whole thing, and my legs, like my whole like waist down, went completely fucking numb. Oh God. It was something that at the time was like, well, that is kind of weird, but at the same time, it's like, it's because I've been sitting this whole time. I need to stand up and stretch my legs. But then he came back and spelled out the words, beware. I, of course, roll my eyes. I'm like, okay, beware. Ooh.
This is like the first honest part of this entire story.
I was like, oh, beware. And of course, I think everyone else is just messing with me, being like, John, you shouldn't do this. You should believe. I'm like, okay, like, everyone's fucking with me. What am I going to beware of? What the fuck is going to happen? By the time they had finished spelling out the word, everyone was just looking at me, being like, you don't know what you're doing right now. Like, this is going to go in a bad direction, and you're not even gonna know it, and it's gonna be too late before you realize like what's going on. As we continue asking this thing more questions, he went back and said beware like multiple times, and at that point we're like, okay, beware of what? Like what should John be aware of? As the planchette started moving around, it started spelling out WINDOW, right? I was like, window. And they all look at me like, stay away from windows. Like, if I were you, we should avoid all windows for the rest of the night. I'm thinking to myself, like, already, like, this is too fucking, like, out there. It's too outlandish. It's ridiculous. I'm not buying it. But as they're telling me, do you want more candles?
Yeah.
And as they're saying, John, you need to stay away from all your windows, or all the windows or whatnot, I look up to them, and I say, why should I be afraid of windows? But as I'm speaking this fucking sentence, literally before I could finish my thought, from across the room, you remember those like really, like those older blinds? Yeah,
like
the really metallic ones where if you like run your hands through them.
Bend. It's like the ones at the portables in your school.
Yeah, exactly. The really loud, obnoxious blinds. Her house had those. And when I was asking the question, why should I be, or like, what about windows? Oh shit. Those blinds just completely fucking fell. And imagine that you took a hand and you just completely ran your hand through all of those blinds and it just made a fucking sound. Except it was very loud, very shrill, and it caught all of us by fucking surprise. And so we all go and look at the window and the blinds that are now moving. Yeah, I'm like starting to shake now. Yeah. Now that I'm like really like starting to really remember it. When we were all looking at the window trying to be like, okay, in my head I'm like, that's fucking weird. That right there is kind of strange. I don't know how to explain that exactly. I was confused more than anything else, and as I'm looking and thinking like, that's a weird fucking coincidence if it's a coincidence. I don't know how to explain that logically, and so I turned to look at the group to be like, hey, what do you make of this? But by the time I turned, no one was fucking there. I was completely by myself. And keep in mind, all the lights were off except for fucking candles. I had this just draining feeling of just like I was hot and cold at the same time, where I like felt like I had chills, but I also had a sweat going on. I was just like, all right, this is fucking weird. And then I shout in the direction of the hall that leads downstairs. I'm like, hello, where are you guys? I hear everyone from downstairs. They all apparently fucking bounced when it happened. And they all like are calling, "What's going on up there? Are you okay?" And it's like, "Yeah, I'm fucking fine. I'm confused. Why am I by myself? And what happened with the blinds?"
You're confused.
I'm confused.
You're playing with a Ouija board. You
Yes.
say, show me some shit. And they're like, beware of the windows. And then
Yeah.
some shit happens with the windows and everyone freaks out and runs away. You're confused as to what's happening?
I was, yes. It was very jarring, to say the least. At that point, I decided to take a break, go downstairs, and we just kind of chill in the kitchen. We're just, hanging out for about 30 minutes or so, and just trying to make sense of what was going on. They were explaining all of this stuff to me, like, hey, this is what's going on, this is why this is happening, we need to do this to remedy the situation. They're like, we can't leave it upstairs, we have to say goodbye. We have to close out this whole encounter and session. And so I was like, all right, whatever you want. But they looked at me and they're like, but please, whatever you do, like... Whatever you do. God damn it! You see what I do?
You see what I deal with?
It was like, what's it like touring with Austin? And then it's just
yes.
just the whole time,
Constantly.
just always. As we were closing out and saying our goodbyes and being like, who else is here? Whatever. I remember just having this very strange like sensation and feeling in my arm, specifically my left arm. My arm started getting numb, and I started feeling like very strange tingling sensations, and kind of like whenever you have like restless leg syndrome, it's like my hands like couldn't stop moving. I was just like trying to stretch and make it just stop and kind of like get some blood flow back into my arm. But of course, during that time, I'm not making anything out of it. Like, it's just like my arm is feeling kind of strange. We're finishing up this whole thing, whatever. But as we continue to close out and finish talking to whoever, it started getting more and more prevalent. And it started getting, like, to the point where I wasn't able to really ignore it because my arm was just kind of bugging me so much. But it got more and more intense as the night went on. And scoot forward. Until it got to the point where I felt like something... Imagine that something is grabbing the back of your arm, right? Similar to, like, this, right? Like you're trying to push or pull someone it's like towards you. I was like, hey guys, this is really strange, and I don't know what to make of it, but I'm just my arm is giving me like some issues right now. I can't really describe, but it feels like it's numb. It feels like something's like pulling on it and it's whatever. And that's pretty much when everyone was just like, what do you mean? It's like, well, I don't know. Like, it just feels numb, and it feels like this or whatever. It's like falling asleep, but it feels like something's like pulling on it, and I can't. It's like restless. And everyone was like, okay, well, let's finish this, which we did. We said goodbye. We did the whole thing, and at one point, my girlfriend at the time looked at me and was like, John, like, something's wrong. Something's wrong with your neck. I was like, okay, fine. I'll go to the bathroom and take a look. I notice that it gets more red, like more like down towards my shoulder. And as I pull on my shirt to reveal it, I'm noticing that my chest and shoulder area is very, very like red, and it looks very like irritated. I noticed that there were lines, like veins and shit like that on my shoulder. And I was like, what the fuck is that? So I take off my shirt, which I'm not going to do now. I have these welts and I have these lines that are starting to form, and it just looks like a big jumbled mess on my shoulder. And his name was Nathan. That's what it was. I was like, hey, yo, Nathan, come in here real quick. And he was like, what's up? And I was like, does this look weird? And he looked at it and he goes, oh, fuck. And he just completely just bolted. Like, he just like got out of there. Yeah. And I was like, all right, cool. Here I am by myself, shirtless, looking at myself in the mirror.
Straight chilling.
And he brought the girls into the bathroom, and he was like, y'all need to see this, what's going on. And they look at my reflection in the mirror. My girlfriend at the time just covers her mouth, screams, begins to cry, and then runs away.
Very cool.
And I was
but that was like a normal thing.
And I was like,
she looked at
I was
you,
like,
right?
I feel bad. Okay. I'm feeling really bad about everything, not because I think some paranormal shit's going on, but I feel bad because I'm like making everyone else feel shitty. Her cousin and her friend were there being like, John, do you see what that is? I was like, it looks like a bunch of fucking lines. And there's like, no, look at what it's doing. And as I'm looking at it, a shape begins to form. And as that's happening, they start saying like, "Oh my fucking god, oh my fucking god." It clicks with me that all these like lines and markings and scratches that it looked like that were forming on my shoulder were taking the shape of a star. A fucking circle began appearing around it, which was pretty much at that time was like, all right, game is over pretty much. I don't know what to do. Went home, went to bed, and that was the whole thing. But see, here's the thing. And don't get fucking mad at me. After all of this, and I skipped a whole bunch of shit, believe it or not. After all of this, I still was just, I didn't know what to make of it, and my mind was still trying to process everything, and I couldn't really buy into the, like, hey, there's a fucking pentagram on my shoulder, this stuff happened, I need to tell Austin.
Your dad's going out of town, you were going to stay with me for like, it's like almost a week or something.
Uh-huh.
And, so that's when you had already explained it to me, but then I was like, okay, well, show me then. And because you're like, every time I talk about it, it like reappears and, you know. So I was like, okay, do it. And I literally watched this shit happen in my living room. Took his shirt off, explained it, blah, blah, blah. And it just, like, you could see the circle and everything starting to appear and, like, just lines and shit. And I was like, and I was watching, too. I was like, he might be fucking with me. So I was like, well, that fucking sucks because now you're here for a week. The thing is, I saw that, like, it was, like, a very absolute thing of, like, oh, for sure, that's what's happening right there.
Like, beyond a reasonable doubt.
But again, you don't believe in ghosts, cool. And so,
that's not it.
And, so there were certain things where, and I know that this sounds like fucked up, and I can't prove this because it wasn't a definitive thing, but there were certain moments where John's face didn't look like John's face, except it was all like in like momentary, like when he would turn and like, or like when he turned to look at something or whatever, and I would get like, you know, I'd be looking at him and see him do that. There were a few times where it just didn't look right, and I was just like, fuck, and I don't even think I brought it up when it happened.
What do you mean didn't look right?
It didn't look like you.
What did it look like?
Is it like distorted in a way?
Oh, it seemed distorted in a way, but like subtly, you know, not in like a his eyes are down here kind of way, but like, there was just something where I was like, that's not right. But again, that's not a thing I can like, where it's like a definitive, like,
yeah,
I was looking at your face and it
yeah.
was like this and this, like it was never like, I'm staring at you and getting a clear look, it was just like flashes of that, and I'm like, this is fucking awful. And so here's the thing. This is why I don't want to do shit with him. Not just because of this, but because you can see how he's acting now and he's still downplaying it. And he still doesn't see where he went wrong here.
No, I do. I acknowledge it. I acknowledge that I was being a little bit more...
You're still saying it wrong.
Okay.
Asshole.
Okay. I was being very fucking belligerent.
Yep, there it is.
I was being very excessive.
Mm-hmm.
This was my first fucking encounter. I had no idea what etiquette I was supposed to have when dealing with fucking demons and ghosts and shit like that. Anytime I would tell the story, or I guess anytime that I would talk about Jason in particular, I would get that same numbing feeling, and I get that same restless feeling, like someone's pulling on the back of my arm, like my arm is starting to lose circulation and my hands and fingers start getting all tingly. And anytime that I would start talking about it, that would happen. And so when I would talk about it, Austin and I went to the bathroom, looked for it to appear, and sure enough, it would just right in front of us, just come out of nowhere. It would literally just come up from nothing.
Mm.
And specifically, we had to look at it through a mirror. Like, do you remember what it looked like whenever you looked at it directly through a mirror? It
seemed darker in a mirror.
Because of these things that Austin would see, like every now and then when he'd look at me, he's like, you don't look like you, or whatever. He was convinced that I was possessed. It's not like my fucking voice changed. I wasn't like
I'll say.
Fucking Emily Rosing it down the stairs and shit.
I don't know if you were like full on. I don't think you were full on possessed, but I think there are certain degrees of it, and I think you were one of them.
So when you looked at me, you didn't recognize me. Was there anything that I missed?
I mean, the point of all of it.
What's the point?
Don't do that.
Yeah, that's true. You shouldn't fuck with that shit, because then sometimes bad things can happen. Someone wants to know if the pentagram still appears. I don't know if it still appears.
No.
I haven't checked. I
Why
haven't
don't
told.
you go look?
I haven't told this story in a very long time, and I'm not going to take off my shirt.